Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Sixth Ranch Podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by State Representative Mark Owens and County Commissioner Todd Nash, my dad. We stayed at Representative Owens' home on a trip to attend a meeting for the Oregon Cattlemen's Association and the Oregon Beef Council. Mark is a good man and a natural leader. He started working as a farmhand and continued that work until he owned land of his own, which he now farms. He's a fearless representative of Western culture, heritage, and natural resources, with tremendous knowledge of the land and its people. My dad is much the same. We talk mule deer, aquifers, coyotes, timber, and leadership. Enjoy the show. So I have Representative Mark Owens from Harney County, and what all do you cover as a representative?
So I was appointed as a representative back in February to House District 60. House District 60 is 23% of the southeast corner of the state of Oregon, encompassing all of Malheur, Harney, Grant, and Baker, and part of Lake County.
So it's a huge area.
Yeah.
If you were to explain how big this area is to somebody who lived in another part of the country, how would you do that?
So it encompasses probably 2 to 3 eastern states. So you could probably take New York, Pennsylvania, and a couple others and put them into House District 60.
That's amazing. How many people live in that district?
Approximately 63,000.
63,000. So still quite a few people, in Eastern Oregon standards where people are spread way out. That's a lot of folks that you're standing up for.
So every House district in the state is split up by population. So we all represent about the same amount of people.
Oh, really?
What changes is the geographic location to house that many people.
I didn't know that. That makes sense. That's a pretty fair way for it to go, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I also have with me my dad, who is a county commissioner from Wallowa County, and we're down here outside Burns at Representative Owens' house, and we're going to go to Oregon Beef Council meeting tomorrow. And Mark, you're a really impressive guy to me because you worked your way into this American dream of farming and did so in a way that allowed you to give back even more by being a community service member. So how did that all come together? Like, where did you start and how did you get here?
Where did I start and how did I get here? So I was originally born in Walnut Creek, California. My parents moved me out of there on my 8th birthday. They moved us outside of Portland, Oregon, in a little town called Boring, Oregon. I went through there. When I was in high school, I met a friend, Lance Abels. His dad had a ranch out here. He was an absentee owner. So I started coming up to Harney County when I was a sophomore in high school. After high school, I went back and was supposed to go play football and decided not to. Started some horticulture or landscaping. Got into some things I probably shouldn't have. Came back to Harney County because it's the only place I'd actually ever found peace. Harney County allowed me to, as my wife always appreciates me saying this, live the American dream and be very successful. The most successful thing in Harney County was meeting my wife, Celeste, marrying her and having 2 great kids. I saw some of the opportunities that I had becoming harder for others. And when I saw that, I figured that I'd been fortunate enough it was time for me to give back. So I got on the Planning Commission, and from the Planning Commission, I wanted to become a county commissioner. And as I became a county commissioner, I found a lot of value in the other Eastern Oregon counties. Met your father, Todd. Todd and I built a great relationship serving our individual counties, but found out that we had a lot of like concerns. It seemed like that most of the Eastern Oregon counties had a lot of like concerns. So when the opportunity came to serve more of Eastern Oregon, I had grown enough as a leader that I thought, why don't I give it a shot?
What are some leadership principles or traits that are important to you, things that you feel like you possess as a leader?
I think one of my greatest assets is I learned how to be a voice of my constituents. Learn how to bring a lot of their concerns and a lot of their issues to people that are in charge. And I can do it most of the time maintaining a rational thought process and not getting too emotional. I see a lot of my community members are very passionate about something, and they get that passionate, they try to explain it or they try to promote change, and they get more frustrated and they can't get it done. So I feel I have an ability to be that voice for people.
Now, I listened to your speech that was regarding a House bill that was going to ban coyote hunting competitions. Now, my understanding is that the consequences of banning that bill would have been really severe because there's currently really no regulation on coyote hunting at this time, and that's part of Oregon's constitution, isn't it?
So I'm not sure it's part of Oregon's constitution that there's no ban, but as you know, James, coyote is a predator, so there's no hunting season on predators. Predators can be shot or dispatched at any time, any part of the year. So it's not a game animal. So therefore, there's no basically rules or laws that says when or how you can shoot a coyote.
And do coyotes really do any damage in Oregon?
They do a lot of damage. So it's not, the coyote is not perceived in Eastern Oregon as probably the same as perceived in Western Oregon. So a lot of us don't find it as a cutty, warm dog. The economic hardship that a coyote can play on a rancher is devastating. When you've seen a coyote eating a calf that's coming out of a cow, or you see a coyote that's eating the prolapse of a heifer that's lying down, and you know that rancher is not going to be able to have income from that, and the suffering that's happening to that animal, it becomes more than... It's a predator, and it's also a predator that's affecting the livelihood of the biggest agriculture asset we have out here.
And then for the sheep producers as well.
Yeah, it can be devastating, more devastating to a sheep herd than a cow herd. I mean, it can go through and just kill for pleasure and take a lot of the profitability out of a whole operation in 1 or 2 nights.
Dad, what kind of effects have you seen on livestock from coyotes over your time in Wallowa County, which is quite a lot different from here? This is more of a Great Basin type feel, sagebrush, a little bit less topography. Wallowa County is more alpine, canyons, valleys, things like that.
So my experience with coyotes has not been necessarily negative as far as the cattle industry in Wallowa County. In the time that I raised cattle there, I never knew that I actually lost one single calf to a coyote. And that isn't the same with all my neighbors. I had neighbors that got hit at different times, and much like Mark described, there were some of them that when heifers were in the calving process, the coyotes would get accustomed to eating the calf on the way out, but there were a lot of mitigation efforts to take care of those individual coyotes. As long as I got along with them, we got rid of a lot of coyotes. We did shoot some, we did trap some, did some aerial gunning, but for the most part, me personally, I got along pretty good.
And I'm a huge fan of killing coyotes myself. I enjoy a great deal. I like trapping coyotes, I like calling coyotes, and it's really part of our culture as hunters in the Intermountain West and in the Midwest for sure, is that this is something that we do. And we feel good about contributing to both removing some pressure from the livestock in the area, as well as removing pressure from the coyote's prey base, which is oftentimes the same thing that hunters are targeting. So where we have mule deer that are plummeting their populations all across their range, we know that coyotes are killing a lot of mule deer fawns. And the only way to improve a mule deer population is to have fawns that hit the ground and survive. So if you have coyotes killing fawns, then you're going to have this very, very precarious, struggling population that isn't going to have the same opportunity for success. So any chance that we have to remove coyotes is a good thing. And coyotes have compensatory birthing. Despite every eradication effort that people have attempted, whether it's poison, aerial gunning, trapping, bounties, coyotes are so resilient. It's amazing. They're going to be here a long time after we are. So any method that we can use to take the pressure off of those prey animals that matter to us, whether that is livestock or whether that's the animals that we want to go out and hunt, like deer and elk and antelope, I think it's a good thing. And the fact that there was people that didn't understand that and kind of wanted to get in the way of this coyote derby that was removing a handful of animals, like 60-something coyotes.
Yeah, so the derby or coyote calling contest that came under a lot of scrutiny. I believe that weekend they only killed 68 or 69.
Yeah.
You bring up a point, James. It's interesting. The what did you say? The compensatory birthing. So that was actually one of the arguments on why they shouldn't allow you to have coyote derbies. Because actually, the more coyotes you kill, the more they have dogs, and the population goes up. But one thing we tried to convince them is we pay to have coyotes dispatched. We pay flyers to come in. So we can bring people in to actually do that. One, it saves us money. Two, it's sport. And three, it starts to put the fear of God into that coyote. So when they see a rancher, they see a farmer, they see a vehicle, they become cautious. So when you're in your cow herd and you're going out to check your cows, just the presence of you will put those dogs on guard and have them maybe stay away farther and go back into their native range and prey off of everything you want to hunt, but at least not preying off of the cow or calf.
Yeah. And we also have the sage grouse down here, right? Has that been part of your battle at all, either within agriculture or politics?
Yeah, so the sage grouse actually really blew up prior to becoming a county commissioner, and they've done a lot of work on that. But the sage grouse habitat in southeast Oregon has the very, very harsh impacts on grazing or anything else. They want it at all costs to save the bird.
Yeah, and at all costs meaning that if they found a lek, like a sage grouse mating ritual site, how far did they want to keep cattle away from that?
Todd might know that better than me, but I mean, they don't want you grazing near leks.
I don't know the answer to that. We don't have any sage grouse habitat or presence of sage grouse in Wallowa County, and so I've been mostly distanced from that. There was incentive programs to do resource mitigation, and those conservation efforts, a lot of the farmers and ranchers down here signed on to those things so that they could go ahead and keep operating and recognize those conservation efforts. And so there's been a lot of collaboration between agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the state, and individual ranchers and organizations. And so far, we've kept the sage grouse from being listed here, and that's been a great success story. Of course, we do have some of the conservation groups that aren't happy with that still, and there's still rumblings of lawsuits. So we'll see where it ends up. But I really salute these guys for keeping the sage grouse as healthy as can be, working through the problems and recognizing that there's maybe some solutions out there where everybody can stay operating.
Todd refers to the group, it's the Candidate Conservation Assurances, so CCAs. And a lot of the ranchers in southeast Oregon has put in for that, and that is trying to develop better sage grouse habitat while maintaining grazing. And it's been highly successful, and it also gives them a guarantee if the bird does get listed that they won't be impacted. So it has been a win-win. It has been showing how the rancher can work with ODF&W and work with the federal government in order to protect a bird and maintain grazing activities.
And if we are talking about protecting a sage grouse, which is a ground-nesting, ground-dwelling bird, we also need to think about protecting it from ground predators like coyotes and bobcats. And one of the animals that people really don't consider that is extremely hard on the sage grouse is the raven. And anything within Corvidae is fairly well protected against hunting. There's no hunting for ravens at all, but there have been places where ravens have been reduced through government culls or whatever. But, there's a lot going against a sage grouse, and we have ranchers and farmers down here who are doing everything they can to promote sage grouse habitat while also maintaining their livelihood and producing food for everyone who's out here listening, because we all enjoy food, and that's what makes us be able to survive, and that comes from agriculture. Just a subtle reminder. Another thing is, Dad, you said conservation groups, and for some reason that word just doesn't seem to sit quite right with me, and I tend to call them preservation groups. And I'll remind people that conservation is the prevention of the wasteful use of a resource, and that is the definition. So when we're talking about conservation biology, we're talking about things occurring in nature that we can consider a resource and preventing the wasteful use of those things. That is not what these groups are doing. They are preservation groups that don't want to have any impact in any way. And it's an idyllic and unrealistic approach to solving these problems that are real problems. So that's my bet on conservation. And you guys are going to hear that and more from me in the future.
I call them much worse than that, really, but I'm just trying to be polite here.
Let me give you an example on that one. So a conservation or preservation group might be the Audubon Society. So the Audubon Society has been one of the biggest protectors of sage grouse there is. They actually don't believe that grazing and the bird can be compatible, where the science says it can. So they're some of the ones that are speaking the highest and like to try to get all cattle off the range of sage grouse. As you mentioned, James, one of the biggest death rates for sage grouse is avian predation.
Yep.
So ravens and crows. So the Audubon Society lobbies against any killing of ravens and crows, but their number one bird they want to protect is the sage grouse. The number one threat to this sage grouse is ravens and crows. They'd rather kick cows out than to try to eliminate the one species that is killing their protected bird.
And we get back to the argument whether it's more important to have a barred owl or a spotted owl.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a murky one. That's a topic unto itself. In the spirit of resources, we're geographically in a really unique place. And I would say geologically in a really unique place as well, because this is a closed basin. So what does that mean?
Closed basin, so Harney County or Harney Basin is the only closed basin in the state of Oregon. So no water leaves this basin and goes to the ocean.
That's fascinating. So we can think about this as a bowl with a lake at the very bottom of it. And all the snow, all the rain ends up going either into this lake or down into the ground and going down into groundwater, correct?
Yeah, so the sump, the lake, most any excess water that comes off as springs or streams ends up in the lake. They're telling us that very little actually gets to recharge underneath the ground.
Okay. And then there are some tributaries coming into this water that are actually very productive trout fisheries as well, right?
Yeah, so your Blitzen, your Sylvies, and sometimes your Malheur. Your Blitzen is one of the, and has quite a bit of red band trout. Seems to be a very stable population in that area.
And the red band is a native rainbow trout that, unlike rainbow trout in the rest of the state that can access the ocean, this is a resident species. So a rainbow trout in the John Day or the Deschutes or the Wallowa or the Grand Ronde or the Snake, it can lay eggs with another rainbow trout that's a resident, and some of those eggs will go to the ocean and come back as steelhead, and some will remain and be residents. So it really gets muddled up. So we just call all those fish Oncornicus micus, whereas the red band trout is a thing unto itself because we do have this really unique closed basin type of geography.
Yep, they never have the chance to become a steelhead because they'll never hit saltwater.
And Malheur Lake down here, this sump, it has some invasives that are causing quite a few problems, right?
It does. So ever since the flood in the 80s, when the water took over a vast amount of areas, somehow something happened that carp got introduced. And they've never been able to control the carp population in the lake since the 80s.
Interesting. Well, we know from other areas that carp eggs are very, very sticky. They have an adhesive element to them, and carp want to lay their eggs on vegetation, and that's why they tend to spawn in the springtime when water gets up to that 68 to 72 degree mark, and they're up there in that flooded vegetation sticking their eggs to stuff. But what is also in that vegetation at the same time is waterfowl, migratory waterfowl. So it's very easy for these eggs to get stuck to the feet of waterfowl, and then when they go to a new area, they can be transporting fertilized carp eggs to that new area. So what folks have to realize is that it's not good enough to say, okay, we have carp in this pond, they're not going to go anywhere. The complication is that we have birds that can help them travel great distances. So that's a very strong possibility because you have a tremendous number of migratory waterfowl that move through this area, right?
Yeah, it's the sonic flyway. It's one one of the most important flyways for the migratory birds. Yeah.
Can you tell me anything more about that? I mean, I saw migratory birds out here that I couldn't even identify this evening.
Yeah, either can I. But so as they're going from north to south, they tell me they need places to rest over. And so this is one of the better places for them to rest over because of the flood meadows of the rancher, the water that's in the lake, the breeding capacity. So it's basically a big rest stop on the big sonic flyway.
So water being in this closed basin where we have an aquifer that we don't fully understand how it's replenished, and it looks like it doesn't get replenished very easily at all. We're using that water to irrigate crops, which then go to feed people or go to feed animals that then feed people. This is tedious. This is like drawing money from a bank account that we're not depositing money into. At least we're not depositing money into it at the same rate that we're withdrawing it. So how do you deal with a dynamic like that? Because we have a growing population in the world, we've got to feed them, and we need irrigated crops to do so. So how does this all work?
So it is complicated, and there's a lot of varying opinions on that. But you use the analogy of a bank account, which is a good analogy. The USGS scientists and Water Resource Department scientists are coming in and doing a comprehensive groundwater study, and a lot of things they look at is the water budget. The water budget, like you say, is just like a bank account. So much gets deposited every year and recharged, and so much gets pulled out, whether through natural evapotranspiration or through the production of ag, like you say. And so they're saying we're drawing down our bank account faster than it's being put in. But let's give you a hypothetical, James. The area that's declining the fastest in this basin is called Weaver Springs. The static water level there in March is about 110 foot. And so it's dropping 5 to 8 foot a year, measured in March every year. But that bank account's 1,000 and some odd foot deep.
Okay.
So we've only withdrawn 10%. So if you, at your maximum amount of savings, only draw your bank account 10%, are you really concerned?
I'm not that good with money.
Okay.
I mean, I'm buying new guns all the time, buying things for the guns, buying things I can shoot through the guns. I get it. Like I totally get it. But you're trying to forge a way forward so that we can become more sustainable with water, and still be able to produce crops to feed this growing population. So tell me a little bit about that.
So that's where we're at. A lot of people are panicking when we've gone through 10 to 11% of our bank account. I'm not ready to panic. I have identified that we need to figure out how to use less water, because if our weather patterns don't change and we keep pulling that down, pretty soon we get to the point where there's not much groundwater. It costs too much to pull the groundwater out. But we have time to do that. Maybe it takes us another 30 years. Maybe we try to slow that rate of decline down in half in the first 10, half again in the second 10, and maybe half again in the third 10. So we get down to where maybe we're only dropping 6 inches a year. But that gives us a temporal period of about 30 years. And probably the most we'll draw that aquifer down to maybe 300 foot. So all that we'll have taken out of that checking account is 30%. We'd still have 70% left, but that gives us time as a community to figure out how to have alternative crops, technology to keep up, and figure out how to replenish that aquifer. So we have time to work through this situation where we can keep producing food and fiber to feed the people. The one thing I just like to throw in here, everybody says it's the farmer is the end user of that water, and they're the ones that are making money off that water. We are making some money off that water, but we're not the end user. Who's the end user of the alfalfa that is grown here? I would argue the tourist that goes to Tillamook that eats that ice cream cone. Our hay goes to Tillamook, the cow eats that hay, that cow produces milk, that milk produces ice cream, and we eat the ice cream. So I could say consumers are all the end users of the water that is being used in Harney County.
And who doesn't love ice cream?
Exactly. If we can eat ice cream while we're shooting coyotes, that's a perfect deal.
That does sound like quite a challenge. I'm going to have to put that one on my bucket list. So compare that to Wallowa County, Dad. What are the water issues that we face up there?
Well, storage is our biggest issue. And so we have a tremendous amount of water that runs off. We have rechargeable aquifers. We have underground aquifers that exit the county. The amount of water that we have is not our issue. We have a relatively small amount of farmland compared to the amount of water that we have. We have one storage, and that's in Wallowa Lake, and it is significant and does service a large area, but the rest of it is in the form of ditches, and once the snow melts and the runoff ends, that's it. And so we have a relatively short growing season, much like here, and we get by as is. But we have a lot of dry land ground that could be more productive if we had more storage. We have a lot of leaching out through some of the ditches that could be piped. There's concern over doing that we would lose some wetlands that are created out of that. But the amount of water that we have is not of concern.
And because you are concerned about water, and talking to Representative Owens here, you've innovated some ways so that you can reduce the amount of water that you use already. And you've reduced your own use of water by close to 30%.
We have. We've just adopted innovation as it comes out. We haven't designed the innovation ourselves, so we've been very proactive in trying to figure out how we can do conservation through efficiency. And a lot of the way we can do conservation through efficiency is with our irrigation practice and our irrigation technology. So we have put in low elevation sprinkler application. We put in drag lines. We're figuring out how to get the amount of water that we put on the crop to match the evapotranspiration needs of that crop, and trying to make our delivery system the most efficient possible.
What is, and I'm going to take a stab at this word that I've never tried before, evapotranspiration?
Yeah, evapotranspiration. So it is the plant transpires, and then you have evaporation. So it's combining the evaporation and the transpiration of the plant to know how much water a plant would need.
So the transpiration is water molecules moving through the vacuoles of the plant cell walls onto its surface and then evaporating, correct?
So I can say transpiration, but I can't say vacuoles or stoma or guard cells, but I think you have it about right.
I think you nailed it.
Okay.
So one of the projects that we're doing on the Sixth Ranch right now, actually we just completed, is removing a bunch of juniper. So we just cut thousands of juniper trees, piled them up, going to burn them this winter, have a wonderful time lighting all these things on fire. But what we were looking at was about 33 gallons of transpiration per tree per day.
Yep.
Amazing. So when we're talking about this scale of thousands of juniper trees, all of them right along the Wallowa River, now each one of those is allowing an extra 33 gallons of water a day to go down the river, keep that water more cool, allow for more irrigation downstream, and allow for more fish to move upstream. Like, there's a win all across the board. And folks, these are an invasive type of juniper tree. So a painting I have of the ranch from 1906 shows 0 juniper trees in the painting whatsoever. So in the span of a century, we get completely clogged up with these things, and we just had a really badass tree felling crew go through and murder every single one of them, and I couldn't be happier about it.
So Todd, I got to ask you, didn't James, as governor, give you money to actually raise your dam?
Yes, she did.
All right.
Yeah. And so it wasn't actually raising the dams. The Army Corps of Engineers came in and take a look at the dam safety issues, and they asked that we lower the amount that was being held back. And so it's only being able to hold back about 70% of the pool right now. And so the $14 million that's coming in that was through the governor's proposed budget, that is going to get us back to nearly a full pool.
So we were in a meeting with the governor about a year and a half ago, Todd and I, with some other commissioners, when I was still a county commissioner, and the governor was going around and everybody was making comments. And when the governor got to Todd, her first comment was, "We got you a dam, didn't you?" And Todd graciously said, "Yes, you did, ma'am," and asked a few questions. When it got to me, I asked, "Can I have a dam?" And she said, "No." So I think there was definitely some favoritism going on at that time.
Yeah, and I responded that you actually had to have water first.
And she agreed with them. So,
And just to clear up the 70% pool and the full pool for those folks who are interested, we're not talking about the actual amount of water that is held in the lake, because at 70% right now we're only holding back like 17 feet of water in a 300-foot deep lake. So when we can go to full pool, that just means we can hold back 30% more than what we're currently holding, which over the span of a lake turns into a lot of acre feet, which is a measurement that water is commonly referred to in when it pertains to irrigation. Is that correct?
that is correct. 326,000 gallons in an acre foot of water.
Wow. Yeah, when we talk about things like cubic feet per second or cubic meters per second or acre feet, these numbers just get so big that it's almost impossible to think about them in terms of gallons.
It is. And so you'll see a lot of people refer to water like, is it a cubic foot a second? So when someone says, 500 cubic feet a second, to me it doesn't mean a whole lot. So cubic foot is kind of like a basketball. So it's 500 cubic feet a second. It's 500 basketballs going through that pipe every second.
That's
Good
a
for
lot.
me to imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, so when we were looking at the Wallowa River today, which was as high as I've ever seen it, I think, first thing this morning it was around 14,000 basketballs of water per second. Just a tremendous amount of energy. Yeah. So we're down here also next to the Steens Mountains, and the Steens are an interesting geographical feature. It's a huge fault line, right?
Yes, it is.
Biggest in the state. So the Steens Mountains, super cool, super beautiful, and historically it had a ton of big mule deer, and it took years and years and years of application to be able to get a tag down here. And then a combination of events occurred, and earlier you cited that annual grasses, which deer have a really hard time consuming and getting nutritional benefit from, elk population increasing, which an elk will take up the niche of 5 or 6 deer given the same habitat, and then an increase in predation, and probably some other factors that are a little bit more difficult to determine. But what have you seen over the course of your time here in terms of deer population that you've been able to observe?
Wow. So I first started coming up here probably in 1986, and used to be able to go out and see literally thousands of deer in the fields and the hills in the evening. A lot of mule deer. Now there's probably 5% of that population, 5 to 10%. It's kind of crazy. The annual invasive grasses have taken over, the Medusa hedge, to the cheatgrass, to the elk. We used to go up in what we call beaver tables, and when I first came in this country, if you saw an elk track, it was big news. Mm-hmm. You would talk about it. And then 10 years after that, you would start seeing elk, and it was big news. Now if you go up there and don't see elk, it's big news, but you don't see deer anymore.
And do those elk ever come down here in the crops?
They do. So we have a couple herds that come down and eat a lot of the alfalfa. They like the alfalfa.
And is that just a big benefit to you that the elk are down here consuming that alfalfa?
It's a huge benefit. I'd love to run 100 head of elk in an alfalfa field that I'm trying to cut for tonnage.
So a 750-pound bull elk is going to consume about 30 pounds of wet matter per day. And you can extrapolate that down to a cow elk that's going to weigh between 450 and 650 pounds. So if you have 100 head out there and they're consuming between 20 and 30 pounds a day, that's going to get expensive for you pretty quickly. Your margins aren't huge in this stuff.
It is not, yeah. So those pivots at the elk herd, definitely we see a less of a return off those fields. And how much do they wallow, too? If they eat 25 to 30 pounds, I mean.
Yeah, if there's a wet spot, they need to wallow to cool off. Yeah. Yeah, and we can get into wallows on a future elk episode, but just to explain, a wallow is a place where an elk's going to get down in muddy type ground and thrash around, kick water up onto his or her belly. The calves tend to be very playful there. Young bulls are very playful. They will urinate in the water. They'll drink the water. It's a big scent marking area, and it's an important social dynamic, but it also helps keep insects off them. It does a lot of biological things for an elk, so that's what a wallow is. And if you have one in the middle of what is really a lawn that we're trimming and using the trimmings to sell so that other animals can eat it and then we can eat them, then that is a detriment because now that area is no longer in production.
So, Commissioner Nash, what made you decide to become a commissioner?
I kind of thought about it for a long time, and I thought maybe when I retire that'd be something that I'd like to get into. But I guess the thing that started me thinking toward that was the frustration in dealing with the Forest Service, dealing with ODF&W on some levels, and then not knowing how to articulate my positions in those things and knowing what buttons to push. I became stock growers president in 2010 in Wallowa County. And at that time, one of the things I challenged myself to do was to get a rule changed within ODF&W that would allow, and this was completely detached from ranching, mind you, but it was to get a rule change so that active military could come home and hunt. And I thought if I could work myself through that process, that I would learn how to do some of those things that I didn't know how to do. And so I muddled my way through that. A year after I was president in 2013, did get that rule changed, and continued to be active within Oregon Cattlemen's Association on the wolf issue and a few other things. And then in 2016, I was asked if I would run by the Central Committee in Wallowa County. I considered it. I asked my family members. I asked some of the people there that I had respect for that had been involved in government entities, and I was encouraged to do so. So I went ahead and threw my hat in the ring and threw my $50 down and ended up winning the election.
Best or worst $50 you ever spent?
Well, you know, that's an interesting question, but I would probably say best for sure. It's been so interesting doing this. It's not like any job I've ever had before, not even close. I wasn't ever on a school board or anything else, so. It was challenging to the point of being really frustrating the first year, and especially the first half a year. And now that I'm 3.5 years into the process, I tell people when they ask me, do I enjoy it? In the first year, I told them, yeah, sometimes, but I don't know that I'm even supposed to enjoy it. Now I tell people that I shamefully do enjoy it. And a lot of it has been because of the camaraderie of commissioners and representatives like yourself and others, being able to go to battle for my community and win, lose, or draw the frustration level that I had way back when I wasn't able to maneuver through the system. If I can do that for somebody else, it's a really a good feeling.
I can tell you that $50 that was spent in your county that day was the best $50 that was spent in your county. Getting to know Todd as a friend and working with him as a county commissioner, he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, I agree. He cooked some pretty good steaks tonight, too.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Small, but fairly good. Only about 32 to 48 ounces each.
Yeah, a petite 48-ounce ribeye, and I think we made 5 of them. So I definitely housed one of those, and then some dessert and seconds on cauliflower.
So you were the end user of some of that water that was being pumped.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. If there's people out here who are thinking that maybe they're at a point in their life where they feel like representing someone else, whether that is being a class president, or leadership on their sports team, or leadership in any way where they can represent other people and kind of take their cause forward. What would you say to those people who are thinking that maybe they want to step into a leadership role?
What would I say to them? Try it. See if it's something that you find you're good at. But don't do it because you think you're going to empower yourself. Don't do it because you might have a specific item that you want to possibly change for yourself or change for your family. Do it because you want to try to help your team, your class. Do it because you have an attitude of service.
I would wholeheartedly agree. You have to do this with somebody else's best interest in mind. And it was kind of interesting. This is the first time that I've been to Representative Owens' house, and they live, Celeste, and he lived in a beautiful place here in Harney County, wide open spaces. But I've seen Mark go to battle on forest issues and timber issues, and from his house you can't hardly see a tree. And it isn't in his interest to do that. It's in his community's interest. And Mark has done a fantastic job of representing those who can't articulate those points. And it's humbling to see him do that.
Yeah, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that's the biggest misunderstanding about leadership, is that it just means that you're in charge. Like when you're the leader, you are working for the people you're leading, not the other way around. And if you can figure that out and make peace with it, and that's the reason that you're doing it, is you want to enable someone else or a group of other people to be able to do things better by serving them in a leadership role, you can do it very well. If it's for any other reason, man, you're probably going to have some hard times. And that's the root of corruption, I think. Any other issues that you would like people outside of Southeast Oregon to understand about what's going on here?
I'm not sure if it's an issue, but maybe it's a philosophy. Or maybe philosophy is not even the right word, but Oregon is a very diverse state. So we got great oceans, we have the Alvord Desert, we got the Alps of Oregon up in Enterprise, we have high desert. And not a one-size-fits-all. We try not to dictate what happens in a lot of the urban areas. We don't really care if you have a nude bicycle race in Portland. Maybe we don't think that's something that would happen in Harney County. But we would like you not to care that we try to have a derby to shoot a predator animal. We don't care if you have a fishing derby. Don't try to bring your values to our area. Make sure that you understand that regionalization of policy, rule, and law is something that should be supported. We are all one state. We're all different individuals in different areas.
Very well said. Any closing thoughts for you, Dad?
Well, it's always tough to speak after Mark. I would much rather take credit for whatever Mark said. No, Mark captured it very well. We are a very diverse state. We are unique counties and districts, and even within our own districts, we have very different dynamics, and trying to figure out how to work all these things together for mutual benefit of everybody. We have that in mind. We like to hear from our constituents, and yeah.
Well, I'll be a little bit more blunt about it. If you don't know a swather from a baler or which end of a cow stands up first, and you think that you want to set some policy or have an opinion about agriculture, you need to educate yourself before you establish that opinion. Because once you have an opinion, it's very difficult for people to change it. Even if you believe that you yourself are open-minded, new evidence doesn't necessarily change your mind. So educate yourself first and then make up your opinion. And I think that that's a good thing to live by anywhere you go. Gentlemen, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you, sir?
where can you find out more about me? Don't Google me, but go ahead and email me. So email me at rep.markowens@oregonlegislature.gov. Ask me any questions. Everybody always has an invite to come out to Southeast Oregon. If you want to come out and educate yourself, shoot us an email. We'll have you out here. We'll show you what side of a cow stands up first. We'll show you a cutter and bather, and we can help educate you.
Awesome. I don't think that there's many representatives that would actually live by that, and I think that you absolutely will. And if they want to find out more about County Commissioner Todd Nash,
well, they can go on the county website and they can find my email there. I post my cell phone. I'm available anytime, and I prefer to get a phone call. Same way, and some of the most effective things that we've had have been inviting legislators and different people out. We've had exchanges with junior high kids and brought them out to our places for 4 or 5 days at a time. All those things have value, and the more that we meet and understand each other, the better we're going to get along.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Catch you next time. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed hearing from Commissioner Nash and Representative Owens. If you want to follow up with these gentlemen, they would love to hear from you. This podcast was edited by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. If you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to subscribe and share it with a friend. Talk to you again soon.